Welcome to Inside the Pressure Cooker, where cooks and chefs share their stories of life inside the kitchen.
I do have the luxury of having one hand. Um, I can work on a line great, but it's the first real time in my life where I've been put in a position where I need to produce for a living that I'm not as good as I would like to be at it because of the fact that I've only got one hand. I grew up playing basketball, playing golf, playing football. Crossing monkey bars and juggling were really the only two things that I wasn't able to do. And I'm perfectly functional on a line. Seeing other people go faster used to bother me a lot, but now it's kind of the okay, like I don't need to be doing that anyway. Like if I'm ever on the line, if you ever see the chef on the line in a pretty high production restaurant, either he's just knocking off the rust or something has gone wrong. That's why I call it a luxury, because my team kind of understands that. On a podcast, you don't really get to see it, and it's an interesting facet kind of who I am that I think lends a little bit of a twist to our kitchen. But you talk about the chip on your shoulder, and I talk about the chip on my shoulder jokingly. But because I've only got one hand, it's kind of the reason I have one. A constant desire to prove people wrong. Again, whether the judgment is real or imagined, all of that kind of goes to that drive.
That's Chef Rich with the Heritage Table in Frisco, talking about his challenges. We all have challenges that we face, personal obstacles to be able to get through. His, I should say, is very unique, and it's fantastic, because at no point did he let that define him. It's, hey, quit bitching and just do it. That would be the best way to put it. He did it. So in this conversation as well, we actually just ended up diving right into it, and I didn't get a chance to ask him about his background. Just the conversation just took off. And but I will fill you all in here. So Rich graduated from Baylor with his degree in journalism and was a sports writer for a while. And the first time I actually met Rich, he came to a restaurant I was at the time, and he had a food blog that he was writing. And this food blog, he came in to study the burger. He was writing about the burger. And sounds kind of generic, but the thing is that this burger was just voted the best burger in Texas by Texas Monthly, which is a big deal, because burgers in Texas, for some reason, are a big thing. And everybody's always kind of jockeying for that best burger spot, whether it's locally or national or statewide, right? And so he came in, and first time I met him, I was like, man, how's this going to work? He wasn't just writing it, he was working here. And he was going to take this burger from start to finish all the way through, from the patties to the prep, all the prep, everything that was involved in it, and leading it all the way through. And he was there for, I'd say, about 3 or 4 days. Because so the other part about that is this burger that we're talking about, I don't know if I just mentioned it, but it was only available 2 days a week, right? It was available for brunch, and that was it. And so Rich spent a couple days working with us, prepping this burger and taking it all the way to fruition. And it was fantastic watching him. He jumped right in without any hesitation. And from there, it just kind of grew. And I kind of lost touch with him a little bit. But the next thing you know, he popped up. He was running a catering company. And then that catering company turned into kind of like almost full-time gigs. He was doing food on the weekends for a piano bar. And then from there, that turned into catering for the Dallas Stars. And this is all before he actually had a restaurant that he was working out of. And fast forward, I mean, he gathered enough capital, and he started the Heritage Table in Frisco. It is a gorgeous house. It's I'll put some pictures up on the website of it. It's a 107-year-old house, and on the inside they did a fantastic job at, I don't want to say renovating it because it was in fairly decent shape before, but just taking care of it. And you just walk in and it just feels good, and the food fits it. Right, he does a fantastic job at it, taking all the elements that he's talking about, of the restaurant, the clientele, and in the building itself, and bringing it all together into one cohesive experience. He's had to make a lot of changes as he's gone, which we all have. His have been very smart decisions, and the restaurant has been thriving. If you're in the North Texas area and you haven't checked it out, you need to. Definitely worth the drive from wherever you're at. You can take a look in the show notes for a link to their website or their social media to kind of see what they're going on, and make your reservation and come on out. And then once you're here, ask him why he's not doing brunch anymore. But here's the rest of this episode with Chef Rich of the Heritage Table. You're the chef owner of the Heritage Table here in Frisco. Still, give me a quick elevator pitch.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who are you?
I'm the chef and owner of the Heritage Table, a restaurant we started in 2017. But actually before that was a catering company. We are focused on upscale American food, which kind of focuses on our local farms, local ranches, integrating ourselves with the culinary producers, the food producers in Texas, and taking what they give us, turning it into something that's particularly special and unique in the Frisco, North Texas area.
Fantastic.
We're in an old, thanks, yeah. We're in an old 1917 Victorian house. It's one of the few old things in Frisco. Main Street's got a few of the old houses, and I like to call it a little pocket of character and charm and a swath of suburbia. But it really helps define kind of who we are and what we do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You walk into an old house like this, and it's got the original 105-year-old floors, and you almost expect a certain fare, a certain experience, and we kind of let the house guide that experience, and then we fill in the rest and hopefully make it a special one.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love what you've done with the building. It's, it's such an old building too. There's only so much you can do internally, right? I mean, is it?
Yeah, the build
is
out.
it historic? Is it considered historic or part of a historic district?
It's not, and it's something we looked into, and there are benefits, but to me, it really it places restrictions on you.
Yep.
That, particularly as we were opening, I didn't want to, I didn't want to be forced to do one thing or another with it.
Yeah.
Particularly considering my vision was to keep everything as original as possible. Which we've done a pretty good job of. Like I said, the floors are still original. We've got a lot of the original moldings, that sort of thing in here.
Yep.
And I when you have a creative vision, you don't really.
It doesn't always.
You don't really
flex with what the city or somebody else tells you need to do. Yeah.
Right. And honestly, Frisco was great to work with.
Okay.
You always worry about. You always worry about, what's the bureaucracy, what's the government going to do, and honestly, it was a really nice surprise.
Yeah, is they always have their vision of what you should be.
Right.
Yeah. No, we've done that before in a couple of restaurants I've been a part of, where we actually looked at joining or having the one of the buildings become part of the historic society or something. Not just because we really wanted to, but a couple reasons. One, they actually would have given us money for some of the renovations. And
Yeah.
two, it would have bypassed some of the current code that was out there that
Hmm.
would have just been ridiculous for us to update the building to meet certain code. So it
Yeah.
was,
We had a scare that we were going to have to put sprinklers in the entire building
mhm.
and fire sprinklers, and it would have been. I mean, it would have been the cost of the building.
Yeah,
And yeah, build out, particularly in the old buildings, is always full of really fun surprises.
yeah, yeah, no doubt. And well, that's fantastic. So you kind of hit a point here where you said it's kind of an upscale American. Now, this is kind of, I don't want to call it a rant on my side, but this is always, I love this term. And I'm saying this with as much sarcasm as I can translate through a microphone. Um, but
Right.
new American cuisine, what is
Uh-huh.
that to you?
Anything that's not something else. Uh, I mean,
Okay.
it's a catch-all, right? It's anything that in my mind, can can't be specifically classified as any other cuisine from any other country or
So
geography.
it's a catch all.
Um, yeah, yeah. Um, generally, new American cuisine in my mind is going to cost you anywhere from $15 to $80 an entree.
Right. Okay. So you're looking at
It
that's
is going
interesting. Looking at it more of a per plate perspective.
right.
Yeah.
It's going to, well, because if it's American cuisine, then right, you're thinking burgers, which I guess still can be in that $20 price range now.
Yeah.
Um,
Welcome to the inflation.
but right. But new American cuisine, um, I don't feel like it defines much. It's vague. It implies a lot without really specifying anything.
Yeah. It's like I was with the restaurant and it was classified. So I don't remember how it came classified, whether it was an owner or media. Said it's a new American
Hmm.
cuisine. And I was like, what the fuck does that even mean? Because I mean, we had burgers,
Yeah.
ribs, roast chicken, like in a lot of ways, I mean, very American is, like almost American bistro, right?
Right.
Um, but
Right.
and I remember going through some of the training and someone was asking me about it. And I was like, you know what? I don't really know what new American means because that implies like
Right.
what's the original American cuisine? Because it feels like we almost
Yeah.
skipped that and went straight to new American.
For
So I mean,
It's it,
yeah, I mean,
it's
it,
funny because I want to define what we do as modern Texas cuisine, because we source from Texas farms.
sure,
We incorporate um, we incorporate a lot of the cultures of Texas into our food. I don't. You look at our chicken piccata and be like, okay, there's not a vast Italian influence in Texas. So yeah, it's fried chicken. It's we incorporate a deep fried chicken. We incorporate uh, traditions that Texas cultures have into the food. But Stephen Piles and Dean Fearing kind of already got that modern Texas cuisine stuff, and mine doesn't look like theirs.
well, and even then,
So I
I
almost
mean, their modern Texas was 30, at least 30 years ago.
sure, yeah, yeah, and which I mean they they were pathfinders. That
Sure.
obviously their importance cannot be overstated. Um, but my food doesn't look like theirs. I don't know if I'm even allowed to call my food modern Texas cuisine. Do they have a patent on it? Do they have a trademark on it? And so I have to fall back onto the American cuisine because I know it's accurate, but I also I don't really know um, more specifically how to classify our menu.
No, I mean, that's, kind of goes down and it makes it interesting because like I like the concept of modern Texas because it means it's refined or uh, kind of fits what's going on and just kind of the blending of cultures that have happened over time, but staying true to the roots of it. Um, but
Hmm.
then you also get stuck in, when you say modern, do people automatically think fine dining, upscale, and expensive?
Right. Right. Are we gonna have foams and spherification on our plates here? Which you're not, by the way, here. Unless that foam is a whipped cream with your pie. Um,
Whippy cream.
right. And it's also tough because we're in an old house. There's we walk this line between wanting to put food in front of people that they recognize as something familiar to them,
Yep.
while also making it, also allowing our kitchen, um, allowing our passion to show through in innovation and, and creating new things and flexing our creative muscles a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've always, as much as I love Texas in a lot of ways, that the clientele can be very, we'll just say particular, um, and
Yeah.
not necessarily as flexible as some parts of the country. So yeah, I mean, you're spot on. That's exactly what I was doing. A lot of my restaurants here in Texas, where you give them something familiar, and I think a
Hmm.
lot of chefs will kind of um, relate to this, but something familiar in an unfamiliar way. Um,
Right.
and you give them something familiar to read on the menu that's like, oh, that's in my comfort zone. I got this. And then you kind of you
Right.
almost start training them to open up and eat a little bit differently. Is it's a lot
Right.
about training your guest.
And your menu phrasing.
Yeah.
Um, I have in our kitchen, I have a spaghetti rule. And if if say my Sue comes up to me and pitches me this idea, if it's a dish that I think everyone is going to be super familiar with on their own level, um, then I'm probably not going to run it. I'm not going to run a spaghetti because everybody's idea of what spaghetti ought to be, you
Yep.
call it spaghetti bolognese, or change the noodle and call it something else bolognese. They're always going to go to spaghetti and meatballs, or the homemade spaghetti their mom made, and that's their baseline of judgment. And so you can make the best pasta sauce in the world and the best pasta in the world, but they're going to say, "Is this the best spaghetti?" Because my mom made the best spaghetti, and this isn't like that.
You can't beat with mom.
And so, right. And so taking those things, and I mean, burgers are the same thing. You have 10,000 different burgers out there, but everybody's got their idea of what the best is. And so you can put this super high quality thing out, but if it doesn't taste like, the burger they had at Keller's when they were 7, then it's not going to be, which by the way, is a great burger. Then
Yeah.
they're not going to be impressed with it.
No, because you can't compete with nostalgia.
Right. And so you have to, like you said, get that accessibility, get something they're familiar with, without without competing with the flavor of nostalgia.
Yeah. I mean, you wanted to generate some nostalgia a little bit,
Hmm.
you
Yep.
know, um, I always love to do that where someone would be like, "Man, where do I remember this from?" Or because
Yeah.
the beautiful thing about food is they've shown that food will impart more memory, if you will,
Hmm.
than any other facet of life. Any other event in life, because food,
Yeah.
you're what when you get transported to your grandmother's kitchen, you remember the smell of the
Yep.
kitchen, the smell of the table,
Hmm.
like the food you're eating. Like I can go back immediately, and I
Yeah.
see it all and I can taste it. Because it hits
Hmm.
all the senses as opposed to
Yep.
any other traumatic event, which is usually not as pleasant. But I mean, in a lot of ways, it's
Right.
just very one sided. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
there's a dish that I've long wanted to run here called halushki and paprikash, and my ancestry is Slovak, and it's a Slovak dish from southern Slovakia. It's a very Hungarian dish too. To me, it's one of my favorite meals in the world. We don't run it because there's no way we would sell it. Uh,
yeah.
there's no way anybody could have that halushki and paprikash and enjoy it the way I enjoy it now because of that nostalgia.
Hmm.
Um, it's a great little chicken and dumpling dish. It really is fantastic. But yeah, that particular nostalgia where it takes you to,
How many times have you?
I have to.
I was sorry to jump there, but how many times
Yep.
have you like made a meal that like maybe it's something like you remember from your family, and it was like the first time you made it, and it was like you're like it's good, but it's just not the same.
I mean, almost every time. I mean, it still happens with PB and J's. I'm PB peanut butter and jelly, and just think to myself, this is a good PB and J, but mom's is better.
Yeah.
Um, but it happens all the time. There's actually a book you touched on it with your comment about food and memories, and it's called The Perfect Meal, and it's the multisensory science of food and dining. It's by Charles Spence, and Heston Blumenthal wrote the foreword for it, and it goes into everything that people sort of don't consider as they're enjoying a meal, or not enjoying, but it helps give you perspective on what is defining their perception of flavor right now. And is it that nostalgia? Is it those memories? Is it the lights? Is it the music? All that sort of thing.
I like that.
Um,
I got to look into that. I'm not
yeah,
familiar with that
and
book.
it's super interesting, and it gets really really in depth, and I feel like it gets kind of weeded near the near the end of it. But um, it's got a lot of really great information in it. Just science and scientific studies, things like that. Just people can have the exact same food 5 times and have a completely different perception of how it tasted based on um, based on outside factors. Their experience, their nostalgia, their comfort at the table, the people around them, that sort of thing.
Yeah, because there's so many
Um,
elements. And I mean, I know
yeah, which
just being in the kitchen too, like when something comes back or when you get that one guest that just comes in pissed
uh-huh,
off, right? And there's nothing
yeah,
you're gonna do to save it, right? And they
yeah,
just what I've
mhm,
been to the point where I've gone to the table and be like, listen, I'm sorry, there's obviously nothing we can do to make you happy anymore. So I mean, this
yeah,
is on me. If you want to stay and finish your meal, fine, but otherwise, I mean, there's we're kind of done here, right? So
yeah, and it's we um, when we opened, we had a few of those. I think hopefully every restaurant does when you first open. Hopefully it wasn't just us.
yeah.
But we struggled. Um, we it was kind of it's my first restaurant to own. Um, and those first 4 or 5, the first 6, 8 weeks when we open, it just crushes you when those guests come
Hmm.
in.
Well, because you're so
When
exposed, like not physically,
Yeah,
but well, I mean, physically you're exposed because you're just drained. But
yeah,
mentally,
yeah,
because you've got so much vested in it, and I mean, it's so much a part of you. It's hard to not take everything as an attack.
yeah, exactly. And eventually you learn. Hopefully you don't become too jaded in the process. um,
Right?
but you learn that those people just they kind of happen, and the better you get, and the longer you're around, and really the better reputation you get, the less they happen because people aren't coming in with a sense of judgment, but having hopefully heard
Yeah.
that you're a good place, they're coming in excited, um,
Yeah.
and they're
Absolutely.
coming in with that. When a restaurant first opens, you get a lot of the people who are coming and say, "All right, well, I'm going to let everybody know how this new place is.
Oh, the fucking Yelpers.
Um, yeah, and I feel like we don't have that so much anymore as we have the people coming in
You've
saying,
got your
"And I've
loyals.
heard great things. I'm really excited about this." Yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
and that's important too that you kind of touch on because I've seen that too where new restaurants, new owners, when they start getting that feedback right away, they go into panic mode
hmm
and they start making some
yep,
really bad decisions based on people that will
yeah,
never be there again. And instead of
yeah,
staying true to who they are, they start like, oh, we got to do this, we got to add this, and now all of a sudden their menu just turns into just a clusterfuck of like some like
you know,
cheesecake factory rejects. Um, and they
and
completely lose their identity.
it's funny that you say it that way because what I've noticed is we're a completely different restaurant than we were when we opened. We opened for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and brunch.
Oof, you hated
Um,
yourself.
I was, yeah. It was insane. And the bigger issue was they were all popular.
Oh no.
Um,
That's right. I remember
and so
hearing you kind of struggled with that.
yeah, we got knocked on our heels. And so we never really recovered. And then, when we were on, it was a great
Hmm.
experience. Dallas Observer came in and named us one of the top 25 restaurants in the Dallas area. Probably because they came in maybe once or twice, and it was a really great experience for them. What And I'm grateful for that. But we were so inconsistent in that first year, um, that some other people didn't have that experience. And then when that story came out, we just
Yeah.
and we already weren't ready for it. And so it kind of helped me realize, like, okay, like this isn't what I want to do. I don't want to be on my heels all the time. I don't want this to be insane all the time. Um, I want to serve really good meals. Like, I want people to come in and take a deep breath and just be like, okay, like I'm going to be here for 90 minutes and this is going to be great. And so post COVID, I kind of said, you know what, we're done with all of the all of this stuff that I don't love. And we're only going to do the stuff that I love. And so it's dinner now. It's just dinner 5 days a week. We put all our efforts into that, and I love what we're doing now.
Do you think you'll ever open for brunch
Uh,
again? Is it? I mean, those are beatings, but I mean, it's good money too.
it is. It's very good money. Um, it's hard money though. Those are hard dollars.
True.
Um, really for everybody. And we're open Sunday night. And if we did brunch again, we probably wouldn't be open Sunday night. And just having a whole new menu, uh, we don't even really have the refrigeration space for all the eggs and all the batter. Um, I don't see us doing brunch on a regular basis here anymore. It's just not the experience that I like people to have.
Okay.
It's super
Yeah.
fast. It's super rushed.
I kind of laugh a little bit.
I don't.
It takes me back to like restaurants I've been a part of where we didn't do brunch, but we only open for brunch on like Easter and Mother's
Yeah,
Day, and those are the two most
yeah.
dreaded days of the year.
They're the worst.
'Cause
Um,
nobody's used to it. Everything's new, and by the time you
no,
figure out what you're
yeah,
doing, I mean, it's over,
yeah,
and you're like, let's never do this again.
yeah. I, I would say that if we do a brunch again, what I'm going to do is make it reservation only because we had, when we closed our brunch, people were really sad.
Yeah.
It was a very popular brunch, but we'd make it reservation only. We'd probably have four or five things on the menu. I joke that we wouldn't do eggs at all. We'd have to do eggs.
Just nothing poached.
Uh, right? Yeah. Um, but I just don't see it. I don't find it rewarding or gratifying.
Yeah, I understand
And
that.
I think of I think of one of my favorite dining experiences was the grape
Mhm.
for dinner. and I loved how cozy it was and how quiet it was and how warm you felt when you were there. Um, and their brunch experience, it was a faster pace. It was bright outside. It was, the intimacy of the grape was part of what drew me into it. And you kind of lost a little bit of that at brunch, not through any fault of theirs. I mean, Brian and Courtney ran a restaurant better than just about anyone. Um, but the vibe of brunch is just different, and it's not something that I love.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's definitely a lot more hurried.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you can
so
slow things down a little bit
in
and
my
do bottomless mimosas. And then that way people just never leave the table. So they camp there forever. And
yeah, those are my favorite people too.
hey, can I have my table back, please?
Right. So brunch maybe in the future, not in this building.
Okay.
Um, it's something that our team does well. But this isn't the place for it.
All right. So not in this building. What does that mean? You got some plans here?
uh, I always,
Okay.
and I would imagine that most chefs, particularly most chef owners, do always have something noodling in their heads. And it would be I would love something like in my mind, my passion is the whole animal,
Okay.
the whole animal butchery, the curing meats, the just the fabrication, all of it. The I love the preservation aspect of meat, but I love the preservation aspect of produce as well. The pickling, the fermentation, all that. In my mind, it would be really cool if um, we could put something together that acted as a commissary for our kitchen, for our restaurant, for the Heritage Table, but also uh, retail on its own. There's
Sure.
a place moderately similar to what I'm thinking called Revival Market that I haven't been to in a long time. It's down in Houston, and the chefs and owners there are fantastic. They do a really great job of cured meats, butchery, um, but also have a great breakfast and lunch. Something laid back, but still really really well done. And something like that would be super cool. But I'm also you know I'm a chef. I'm always thinking of a burger joint or an ice cream shop or a pie shop or I mean that's today's favorite idea.
Right. No, I mean, it's so I kind of see a lot of what you're talking about when you had to pivot during COVID, and you
Hmm.
turned into kind of that
Yes.
market.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. And
how did that
that's
work for you?
the response was great. And if we hadn't been a 4,800 square foot building on Main Street, it's something that might have been sustainable. Uh, but with the revenue that was generating, it was super nice because we weren't going to have any revenue otherwise.
Right.
Um, but it's not something we learned pretty quickly that would have made this sustainable. It's to retail cured meats, to retail you know pies, baked goods, things like that. It's still full time, and it's not something we can do as a restaurant and as a retail outlet. And it's not something that, as a retail outlet, would have supported the restaurant when the restaurant wasn't able to make any money. But we did learn a lot about the fact that people are really interested in it, particularly since it happened suddenly and the response was almost instant. Um, so it was cool. We learned a lot, um, but we also learned that it's not something that we can do here.
Right. Maybe next door.
Maybe next door.
There you go.
Maybe we'll yeah.
That building's been sitting
it's
vacant for a
it's
long time. Who knows?
yeah, it has. And so it's fingers crossed. We've got a little growth yet to do here.
Sure.
And that'll always be my a difficult thing for me is saying, this place is ready. Let's start another place, because I'm always going to have something I want to improve here,
Right.
and spend my time and efforts improving here. Uh, and, that's sort of a just a problem that I'll always have, and just start another place and put more problems on my plate and deal with it that way. But as a nitpicker, you're never really going to be happy, and I'm not sure that I'm ever going to feel comfortable saying, all right, yeah, new place, because this is done.
Yeah, because it's never gonna, like you said, it'll never be done because you're always evolving. The one thing people don't understand is restaurants, especially as the chef and creating the menus, um, you have to constantly evolve. I mean, today more
Hmm.
than ever, you've got to be more reactive in ways
Yep.
in staying current and just
Hmm.
staying relevant.
Yeah, it's full time and to stay in front of people on social media,
Yeah.
which is just not my favorite part.
No.
Uh, but particularly, the fun part of this, of what we do, is, we'll have. Are you familiar with the name Al Havens?
No, I'm not.
Okay, Al was he was the sous, for Abraham Saloon, and he was sous at the HG with the HG guys,
Okay. Oh, yeah,
um,
with Danielle.
and yeah, super super talented. But he got in with A Bar and Ranch up in Salina, the Wagyu beef, and he's all rep for them now.
Oh,
And
okay.
he'll show up some days and just be like, "Hey, we've got this available." I'll be like, "Okay, what's it look like?" And say, "It's got this marbling in it, this much fat. You're probably going to look at 20% scrap." I'll say, "Awesome, I'll take it." And it requires a lot of thinking on our toes, because we just got 40 pounds of meat that I wasn't planning on running beef cheek this week. But it's the fun part, because you're like,
Hmm.
okay, like, this meat does this. It's going to work in this application, this application, this application. Let's try this and this, and then maybe 8 hours later, you've got a new dish on your plate or on your menu.
Yeah.
Um, and that's super fun. But it's also, that's how we operate with all our farms. Is, what do they have in stock? Our farm for poultry, they sometimes struggle with eggs, as all farms do. When winter comes, the eggs slow down,
Yep.
and so we've got to, okay, we're not making this pasta anymore. That takes too many eggs. We've got to have our deviled eggs on the menu. So we've got to take menu. You've got to reallocate. And so it's super on the ball thinking, which makes it fun, but also makes it harder to leave for an extended period. Vacations or another restaurant or what have you.
You said vacation. What is that again? I've heard other people talk about that.
I've heard of it too. It's where the unicorns live out
Oh,
here.
the unicorns. Yeah. Okay.
Over in that fairy tale land.
Yeah. So, you know, when when you're in this creative process and you're creating, and
Hmm.
like you said, I mean, you may not see these beef cheeks. You've got these beef cheeks. You got 40 pounds of cheeks. You create something for it. You
Yeah.
love it. You're running it, and you know what? Next week you probably won't have it. Maybe you will. Maybe you won't. Right?
Right.
How do you
Hmm. Yep.
document, if at all, like the recipes you create for this stuff, and to be able to, I mean, do you ever recall anything and say, you know what, man, we got to do this again? Or are you just running everything like almost from memory?
So I say all the time, I'm a components guy.
Okay.
Um, like I don't think in terms of whole dishes. And I'm not saying this is the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it. I think everybody has a different method of dish creation.
Absolutely.
Um, and mine is, you have this meat. You know what it's going to be like after you braise it, assuming you braise it, red wine braise with mirepoix. Um, and okay, you know that. What do you want the assertive flavor next to it to be? What do you want the texture to be? And then you kind of go through, okay, so I want this sauce, or I want this condiment, I want this texture. What do I have that can achieve that? And so then, you have your component. You have your meat component, and you have this secondary component that's going to complement the meat, or what have you. That component is what I'll document um, metrically. By the way, our whole kitchen is metric.
Nice. Okay.
Um, and that one I'll have. The dish itself. You take a picture of it, and you can look at it and be like, okay, that's what that is. And as long as you have those components, as long as you know how you braise the beef, you know your little thing on the side, and if you have a couple veg in there and a different sauce or some whatever, um, you look at the picture and you say, okay, that was that, that was that, that was that. You can go into the recipe that's in metric, see all the percentages, and say, okay, do I want to tinker with this percentage a little bit next time? Do I want to make this a little more acidic? But it's all there. I pretty heavily document everything we do, because I'm really forgetful. Um, and it just bothers me, because I've made a lot of things before that I haven't documented, and you're like, oh hell, I didn't know this was going to turn out that well. Why didn't I write it down?
We've probably
It's
all been there for that one. I know I have, because I don't write
Yeah,
anything down.
yeah, and I didn't, and I do now. I've got the notepad that fits in my pocket. I've got the big notepad. I've got the. I mean, if there's a piece of paper around me, I'm going to make sure that I'm writing on it, just because I don't want that to happen again. It really frustrates the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, but for the most part, like when you're looking at the entire dish, as much as I hate to say it, like if I want to go back and look at what we've done, um, shit, man, I'll go on Instagram, you know, and be like, okay, yeah, that was a good idea. That was a good idea. This needs that next time. This needs that next time. But it's visual. It's super visual, and it helps you recall it real fast.
Yep.
And you can kind of take that and use your old dishes as a template. At least the ones that worked well.
Right. Yeah. No, I know. I've been to that, and um, I've kind of gone through my own phase, if you will, where I didn't write anything down until, because for me, cooking was also a lot of very organic, right? Where you just kind of let it,
Right.
you just go, right? And you're
Yeah.
tasting, you're moving through. And then when it got to the
Mm-hmm.
point where I needed to document all the recipes, because we're building a restaurant or something, then I'd go through and take a
Mm-hmm.
much more scientific approach to kind of recreating that original dish, right? While it was still fresh in my memory. Because it was
Yep.
also a lot of the times when you're building restaurants, you make so many damn dishes that documenting everything as you go is just,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's futile. I mean, you're
It's burdensome.
absolutely. And I've also, for me, like just writing down as I cook almost feels like it's taking, I don't want to say the passion out of it. But
No, it takes the magic
it
away.
does.
Yeah, and and in fact, it's funny you say that. Like I'll tell a lot of my cooks, like doing things metrically, um, takes a tremendous amount of passion out of it, or of magic out of it, because then you're looking at this and you can say, oh, okay, like our salt ratios in a lot of our recipe are between this percentage and this percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like okay, or if we exceed this percentage of cayenne in your recipe, it's going to be too spicy. Like you don't turn the recipes into math, but you start seeing a lot of consistencies. Um, and you start seeing that the variation in a lot of different foods is a lot smaller than you think it is.
No, that's true.
What's the human DNA is what 99.99% the same for all of us.
Yeah.
and it's that little variability that makes us different. It's not that close to food, but it's still one of those things where you look at it and you say, okay, like salt. I would say that every good restaurant out there doesn't vary really a whole lot on their use of salt. I'd say the percentage is all pretty close around the same.
I would agree with that.
And you just start to think, okay, the quality of a dish is defined by fewer things than you would think, but those fewer things need to be done particularly well.
Yep.
Particularly well. Yeah, there we
go. No, and I'm honestly, I'm all about the metric system when documenting. I've faced plenty of resistance with that with some of my teams in the past, and I had one guy that the chef for the restaurant that was going to be running the place after I created it and handed it off. Afterwards, went through and converted everything back to standard, and I was like, motherfucker.
And look, I won't throw shade either. Like that's how we all grew up learning measurements.
Well, but there's the standard system. Like once you learn metric, it's really easy. I mean, honestly, it's so much easier and more consistent than standard. In some ways, like faster.
Oh, I would say in most ways probably faster because you're dumping things into a Cambro on a scale, or into a bowl on a scale, rather than where's the cup measure thing? Where's the half cup?
Yeah,
All
right, I'm scaling this recipe up. I need 42 teaspoons. Okay, let's do the conversion on that.
Right.
Okay, I need 16.3 tablespoons now, and you're like, what?
Right. How are you scaling? Are you scaling up 1 1/4 cup by 30%?
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah. No, I am a huge advocate for the metric system, to the chagrin of many people that have worked in my restaurant. But I go on unrelenting.
Yeah. Well, I will say though, I mean, like cookbooks. I'm gonna. This is kind of a lead up for this, but cookbooks, right?
Yep.
Cookbooks designed for home cooks. One thing, and I don't know who started this, if it was the butter industry or if it was cookbook authors, but what the fuck is 1 tablespoon of butter?
I can tell you.
Well,
it's about 13 grams.
Yeah, it's about half an inch, right?
Right.
Or something, on one of those cubes, it's like, yeah, okay, so 13 grams. You've done some conversions. Yeah, and I've always been like, you look at it and you're like, 1 tablespoon. Like, what? How did that suddenly become a measurement for butter?
Yeah. It's the MO measurement. Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, actually, I have a theory. So here's my theory. Butter hasn't always been refrigerated, right?
Okay.
How much easier is a tablespoon of butter when it's just room temp butter? Like, that's natural, right? Just grab a tablespoon, scoop it in. It's when we started refrigerating our butter that became an absolute ass whip. Right?
I can see that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll stand by that one. It's not a hill I'm going to die on, but
hell makes a hell of a lot more sense than anything else. I mean,
I'll throw that out as a theory.
I mean, at one point, yeah, I mean, people would just like literally have just a crock of butter on the countertop.
Yeah. Yeah, and in Texas, hell, it was probably liquefied.
Okay, so this crock of butter was invented before air conditioning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Culinary historians.
Yeah, we cracked Da Vinci's code here. No, but still, I mean, we've got to find another way to update that somehow.
Yeah, A lot of I think a lot of cookbook authors, particularly the serious ones now, and quote unquote serious, they're all serious. That's yeah. But the ones that are more specific, your modernist cuisines, your
Hmm.
a lot of your more 11 Madison Park style books are going to have your metric measurements in there, um, and that I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to see the trend coming out because I'm sure restaurants have always done it metrically and just had
Right.
the publishing companies were saying, no, we got to do it this way for the home cooks.
Well, I mean, the
And
books like that are designed for the professional, right? And
yeah,
I can't
yeah,
imagine too many home cooks are picking something up by Daniel Hum and trying to recreate that at home. I
yeah.
mean, I know there
And
are, but I can't imagine.
sure. And it's we did a recipe for a Frisco publication a while back, and I told them, hey, we do our recipes in metric. They're like, can you convert it? It's like, I'll convert it for you, but you also have to publish it in metric
Hmm.
because like that's how it is.
And so did they?
I'm not. No, it was all standard. But I fought it, but ultimately, they have the pen,
Right, right. Um,
and it's a matter of principle that probably I didn't need to expend as much effort as I did trying to convince them that it needed to be a metric. But that's how we
I would
are,
have been curious to see the
stubborn.
feedback from people when yeah, I mean, whenever something's published, it's all going to get published online as well. And man, everybody's
Yeah,
got a fucking opinion about it. So I wonder how many people would embrace it or even notice.
I would. My suspicion is that when any recipe on the internet or any recipe in what have you, Southern Living, 99.9% of the people that read it look at it and say, "Oh, that's nice. I'm going to make it,"
Yeah,
and then turn the page,
right.
um, which is cool. I mean, that's what I do now. Is when I see something cool, I'm like, "Oh, okay, like that's cool. I'm not going to make that, but noted."
It's inspiration.
Like yeah, yeah, like I can. That's cool looking. I can maybe pull something from that.
So
But I
no,
yeah.
I was gonna say like man, there's a couple questions I want to get to. But first, like
Hmm.
so books, right? We're kind of floating
Yeah,
around that right now. Um, what
yeah.
what what books are you following right now, or are on your shelf like all the time that you use for reference? Um,
So on food and cooking is I'm always reading it because there's too much information in there for me to ever fully um,
right.
remember. Um, I have it's a 10-year process, and I've got note cards with all the information on it. It's not an airplane read. And I don't know if you're familiar with On Food and
Yeah,
Cooking.
Harold McGee.
Um, yeah, yeah, and it's the information in there it's a tome of culinary
Yeah,
of culinary, not wisdom, but really facts, just culinary facts, but scientific facts, even a molecular level, just how food works.
yes,
And those are the books that appeal to me. Are you can put a recipe together and say that works. I know that it works, but what I want to know is
why?
is why it works and how it works, and how you're able to manipulate um, certain things a certain way, why they react that way, and how you can maybe translate that to something else or to a dish, or really just understand how it works, how it hits your palate, why it tastes this way when it hits your palate. I mean, hell, why sugar's sweet? You know,
Hmm.
uh, and why meat isn't caramelized; it's mayorized. All that sort of stuff. Uh, that's what I'm interested in, the modernist cuisine. When that came out 10 years ago, my wife was really upset with me for spending that amount of money on basically a series of cookbooks.
Right.
Um, but it was revelatory. It's not stuff we're going to use in our restaurant. We can't pull. We're not using $10,000 centrifuges, but you still kind of understand why things work a certain way after reading that book.
Yeah. And I mean, you never
And
necessarily
it's
know where that inspirational light bulb moment's going to happen.
exactly, um, when we were coming up with our pastrami recipe, like I cross referenced modernist cuisine. Like, okay, it's still pastrami. Like, they do all this crazy shit to it, but the ingredients are still ingredients that you would find in pastrami, any pastrami. And it's cool to see uh, what people can do with food. It's cool to understand what you can do with food if you understand how it
Yeah,
works.
no, that's good because it's when it comes to that creation moment where you're looking for that because like you said, you don't have that $10,000 centrifuge, but there's
Right,
like you want to make that pastrami, you're talking about, but you've got other limitations in your kitchen. Like you don't have a smoker. Um, or
right.
so it's like, okay, how can I find ways to kind of work through this and just figure it out. So
Yeah, the innovation in the creation is, and you say that, I'll clarify. We do have a smoker. I know you weren't saying I don't have a smoker. You were saying we
right.
do. But yeah, the innovation aspect, the necessity is the mother of invention aspect
Hmm.
is, I think it appeals to all chefs who aren't really the clipboard chefs, but the creative chefs. I think that's part of the creative drive for it.
The clipboard chefs, I like
Um,
that.
but while we're kind of talking cookbooks, the to me lately, I've bought a lot. I bought many fewer cookbooks than I used to.
Hmm.
Um, but the Noma Guide to Fermentation has been one of the really big ones the past few years. That's kind of re-energized my passion for fermentation, and it was something that was there before. But getting back into that um, and seeing how they approach it was really cool, and it kind of gave me a renewed passion for it.
Right on. It's just kind of in the same vein, but it's not the fermentation. But have you played with
Mhm.
koji at all?
I have, in fact, played with is the exact way to put it, because it's something that we had a little made it a few times. It's like, hey, this is great koji, and then stopped. Um, Probably because it doesn't have. I'm not able to yet figure out its applications for our menu,
Sure.
and how to incorporate it into a menu at the heritage table in a 100-year-old Texas house that used to be on a farm. You know what I mean? I can't figure out a way to make it fit.
Yeah, that makes sense. I will say though,
Um,
the one I think I've only played with it once, and it was more than
uh,
that, but it was one period, and it was right before I was leaving the restaurants, and uh, and I
mhm,
actually used an A Bar and Ranch picanha, and it kind of cut that
yep.
into fairly thicker steaks, and then blended up
Uh-huh.
koji more into a powder, and then air dried.
Then coated it.
Yeah, and then
Yep.
air dried that for about 72 hours. And man, what it did to the fat cap, I mean,
Yep.
it almost tasted like foie gras. I mean, just right.
Right.
And I mean, you got so much more, almost kind of, I don't want to say livery, but just more
Yeah.
earthiness started coming out of it. And I was just,
Yeah.
it was like,
Yeah.
man, it was interesting how it transformed it.
It's that almost mushroomy, but it's not mushroomy.
Mm-mm.
It's um, and it's not blue cheesy. but it's that it's the depth.
Yeah.
The depth is the best way I can put it. I know. In fact, the only person offhand I can say who's really just awesome at Koji is Misty, uh,
Hmm.
Misty Norris at Petra, and I think it's cool that a lot of people are starting to realize what it can do, and really what it is. 20 years ago, I don't think Koji was on anybody's radar,
Shit.
but it's cool to see how that is kind of developing just another way that chefs can go and produce flavor.
Yeah. I want to say, I mean, probably 5 years ago is when it started showing up on anybody's radar.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it's
in
it's
a
been pretty.
culinary use, right? It's been around obviously for
Yeah,
forever, but
centuries. Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, it was in fact it was the Noma's Koji is what I made,
okay.
uh, and again another endorsement worked great.
Now what?
We just don't have an application for it.
So what inspires you?
um, it's funny because I think of that a lot. Like, what's driving me? Um, I think we all do.
Mhm.
What's my motivation here? Um, as far as dish creation goes, as far as menu development, um, I just love to create. Um, I grew up playing with Legos, hours on end. Um, it's something that is a little different. I like to compare food to architecture when it comes to art, right? Um, People need places to live. That can be a box. It can be completely utilitarian, um, but it's still a box. It still needs to be designed. Food is kind of the same way. You can have a protein bar, and there's no art to it, but it,
It's
it still
yeah,
satisfies
it's
that
fuel.
need. Uh, yeah, and I think I have to have, as a chef, that desire to feed people. Whatever it is, you almost have to have this desire to help others, to want to to help others. You want to nourish them. You want to help them, and then from the creative aspect, you have to have that desire to want them to love it, like to look at it and be like, I appreciate this thing on more than a utilitarian level. Um, art in my mind is something that has no practical purpose. It only has a purpose that can be appreciated. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Um, and so, the more artistic your food becomes, perhaps the less utilitarian it becomes. Um, and my drive is to find that point where, are we 70% art and 30% utilitarian? At what point can you push that creative aspect while still absolutely fulfilling that aspect that people just need to be fed. They need to be nourished, and I think wherever you're able to reach that highest apex for both of them is where you want to be. And I'm kind of motivated by finding
Do you think
that point.
do you think that point of people coming out to eat, post COVID, are they looking more for entertainment than they did in the past? Or do you think it's less?
We've changed so much that it's hard for me to say.
Fair enough.
Um, I will say that our guests um, seem to be more responsive to menu changes, to more ambitious ideas than they used to be. We have a lot of the same guests we had before COVID, but not a tremendous amount. Um, on any given Friday and Saturday night, we're probably still 50-50 on return guests and new guests. And that has a lot to do with the influx of people that Frisco is seeing.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Um, and so, I would say, with all the variables considered, with the heritage table and how much we've changed and how much our menu's changed, all that people are more willing, they're more eager to see something new that they haven't seen before than they were when we opened, which is cool. That's what you want,
Yes.
as at least a chef that wants to create and innovate. That's exactly what you want, and it's cool to see that we have
No, I would say restaurants that are I almost fell into this trap of saying chef driven because that's another term I hate.
it.
But they're
Right?
truly controlled by a chef, right?
Uh huh. Yep.
And uh, and I still believe 100% that the most successful restaurants in the world are owned and operated by chefs, right?
Uh huh.
And because they've got more control,
Right.
and they're able to, put stuff out there, get the feedback, make adjustments, and go. And so many times, people like chefs are just going to be a little bit more adventurous. They're going to want to push things a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more, as opposed to someone
Mm-hmm.
that's like, "Hey, you know what? The P&L statement, it looks fine. Don't fuck with it. Stop doing this. You know what?
Right.
Just put the spaghetti and meatballs back on the fucking menu." Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's just like, and you're just in so many ways, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like soul crushing. You're like, the guests want more, the
Oh, it
staff
is.
wants more,
Even.
right? And all you want to do is give it to
Mm-hmm.
them, but you've got someone standing there putting up this big ass wall that's like, you can't create, you can't innovate. You're like,
Right.
there's
This
nothing
is
wrong, just
this is
leave
the
it alone.
moneymaker. This is the moneymaker.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, well, in 5 years when he closes this place down, or you come to me and be like, why aren't people coming back? They're going over here now, or they're going over here. Like, that's on you.
Because it's stale.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I have to be that person to myself sometimes.
Hmm.
It's we take our chicken piccata. It's a great dish. It's every time I have it, and I really when you're creating a dish, you'll have all the components. Um, but at least for me, in my restaurant, like I'll have our plated dishes very infrequently because the first time I make it, and after I'm show people how to make it, that's how it needs to be made from that point on. It shouldn't change at all.
Right.
Um, and every once in a while, when I have our piccata, if I'm just doing that, hey, run this. I want to make sure you're doing it right. I'm like, man, this is a really really good dish. Um, and I'm so sick of it. Like I'm so sick of it being on our menu. and people love it, and it's our highest selling dish. And I look at it, I'm like, I want to change piccata. I want to change piccata. And the servers
Oof.
are like, people love piccata. People love the piccata. All right, like, well, all right, we'll leave it on this menu, but know that it might change. Okay, Rich.
Well, that one, I think you
I
have to just kind of, if you mothball it, you've got to leave it alone, and then just every now and then bring it
yeah,
back. I don't know, stuff like that. You can't just tweak a little bit because at that point you're just going to piss people off. Um,
yep,
as opposed to just pulling it and completely replacing it. Um, you
yeah.
know,
Well, and it takes me back to a story. I realize we're referencing Brian Lusher a lot. Um, but a story he told me once about the grapes mushroom soup.
that's only
Um,
what 40 years
and
old at the
he,
time.
yeah, yeah, and it was, I mean, the mushroom soup was legendary. It was a Dallas icon, and he was just like, I've tried to change the recipe to it, and people revolted. Like, I can't change the recipe. I can't do anything to it. It's on our menu, and people love it, and it is what it is. And it's just like, yeah, okay, like I guess I get it.
Hmm.
I totally get it now.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I gotta look that up. I'll send it to you. But it was at Momofuku, where it was their pork
Hmm.
belly, and I mean, it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
in it was one of those things like he had to take it off to be able to become more innovative, so to speak, and to
right.
challenge the guests. He's like, it might come back. Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
same thing. I mean, so many people are like, you took it off, you got to put, and it's like, in some ways, it's like you almost have to take it off to allow people to see the rest of the menu, kind of take the blinders off.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And when I take it off the menu, I want to send people to you and they get pissed off
Hey,
at
fair enough. All right. Hey, I'm used to it.
Right. Yeah, aren't we
Yeah.
all?
I mean, yeah, 20 odd years in this industry, yeah, go for it. Uh,
No, but the replacement dish is going to be great. Believe me.
oh
Just tell
yeah.
them that.
No, I
And
mean, you're not going to put something
yeah.
in there that's subpar or something you're not, if you're not in love with it, obviously you're not going to do it. Um,
Well, and it's funny. It's funny because you look at, and I don't know if I imagine everyone's the same way. We can confirm or deny this. I'll look at dishes that I put out 3 years ago that people loved, um, thought were great. I'll look back at them and I'll be like, man, 3 years ago, Rich was an idiot. Like, what was I thinking with that dish? And it's just it's funny how our own evolution um, kind of makes us judge who we were and the product we were putting out. Kind of like that piccata, people love it. It's a favorite dish at the restaurant, and I look at it and I'm just like, okay, could have done this, could have done this, could have done this, but I can't do it now.
yeah.
Like it's too late now.
I love how you brought that up. Because I love to do that. At the end of the year,
Hmm.
I'd always go back and look at menus and our specials and things that we did, and you just like just watching the progression. And you always
Yeah.
look back and you're like, man, that's some amateur shit I was doing. It's like, how did that ever work?
Why was that? Yeah, was I just lazy that day or what?
Yeah. Um,
And it's
so
yeah, it's even with sourcing, even with
yeah,
I look back and think, okay, like I could have done this better. I could have done this better. I could have, we could have used a greater percentage of this with that. Uh, everything we do is subject to our own criticism later.
yeah, no, I mean, exactly the same way. And I would tell people, whether it was my cooks or Sue's, and I was like, hey, listen, like, I would tell everybody this day one, right? Like, I'm
Hmm.
not going to be happy with anything. It doesn't mean it's not good, but I
Right,
just personally
right,
think that there's something that we can do to make it better. So don't take anything
yeah,
personally when I don't just, if you present
hmm,
me with something and I don't just fucking roll out the bandwagon and just be like, woo, it's like, it's a fucking party. It's like, no, I mean, I'm going to give you a lot of feedback because it's the same thing I'm going to do to my
yeah,
dishes. Like, just because it's on the menu,
yeah.
I mean,
I'll be
yes, I enjoy it. I love it. But it's not perfect, nor will it ever be. Right. Because there's
right.
that quote.
No such thing as a perfect
I
dish.
mean, perfection is a journey. It's not a destination. Right.
Right,
So,
right.
and I mean, it's just
It's
the moment that you're content, so to speak, with a dish and saying
hmm
it's perfect, I'm going to leave it alone. Then, oh
yeah. It's a couple things. The couple eye roll things that I say to my kitchen is, um, and I would have rolled my eyes to in that position is what's good enough for yesterday is not good enough for today.
mm-hmm.
Uh, and then no dish is ever perfect. Like if I ever say things are good enough, it's time to leave.
Yeah, right.
Uh, because then you're not going to be growing, I'm not going to be growing, and things will just be getting stale. Uh, I'll be encouraging. I want people to grow here because their growth obviously is everything. The growth of the people around you means your restaurant's going to grow.
Yeah,
You want to put them in that position to grow, but you also want them to understand really nothing's ever going to be good enough, and it shouldn't be, and that's okay. They're good enough, but the product always, 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 the experience always needs to be improved,
yeah. I mean,
uh, even in the smallest detail.
because if you've hit good enough, that means you've also lost your drive.
Right,
So
right.
now, creation and a lot of stuff, like when you hit that rut, right? We've all
Hmm.
been there, where it's just kind of, it feels like there's just nothing. You're tired, you're kind of on that edge of burned out. You've got to be able to create something Like, how do you get yourself out of that rut? Like, what do you find? Like, I mean, it's not an easy question, right? And sometimes it's just
There
time.
was, yeah, and it, the good and the bad of it is the longer you've been around, the more likely it is you're going to hit that rut. But also, the greater portfolio you have to draw from.
Yeah.
You can kind of look back and say, okay, well, I did this, so I can do this, I can make it new this way. I mean, you have to force production sometimes. I remember a John Lennon quote. It was yeah, I can make a song. I can make a song anytime, and it'll be a good song. But I find the best ones are the ones that come organically. I have paraphrased,
Right.
but it's the same thing with dish creation. I can make a good dish. I can force a good dish, and it'll taste good, and guests will probably like it a lot. Fingers crossed, a lot. Um, but my favorite ones are still the ones that come organically,
Hmm.
and you just kind of have to, even you know, a, a baseball player in a slump. You still got to go up to bat. You still got to swing, and eventually you're gonna end the slump. That's kind of how you have to do it. You just got to go up there and keep swinging, and then it'll start coming back again. At least that's been my experience. Is it starts flowing, you get that first hit, and you're like, okay, you start riding that wave again. Okay, 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 and then you have a new menu out, or at least the bones of a new menu out in an hour and a half.
Right. No, it's funny you mentioned that because I've been told, where it's the same thing. It's like the more I work on a dish, the more it sucks.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
and the worst of it is that if you knock it out really fast, you never have that feeling that you paid it enough attention. Like if it all comes out super quick and you've got this beautiful dish at the end that tastes great, like I always had this nagging doubt, like, yeah, but that only took me this long. Like I should have sat down for another hour and really thought this through. Uh, but usually that hour just ends up in frustration, and you may be making the dish worse because, because you're overthinking it.
hmm. Yep. Well,
So yeah, it's basically the key to success is never trusting yourself. I'm always going with the gut feeling.
you're never good enough. Follow your gut.
Right, right, right. Just a constant chip on your shoulder from or from uh, imposter syndrome.
Okay.
That's my drive. That's my drive to answer the question from a while back.
Yeah. Okay.
Con-
I belong
constantly,
here.
constantly proving myself, real or imagined, to people that are judging me. Yeah.
Oh man, in today's world where you're judged for everything, I mean, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
I get that quite a bit. So, um, well, chef,
On that, I
no, I was
yeah.
going to say, I mean, what else am I not asking you here? So I actually just looked at the clock. I mean, we're
Oh,
going a little long, so I don't want to take up too much of your time.
oh, no, no. I nothing that I can say that would be of any real import. I although I would think so. I guess that's a matter of perspective. I do I do have the luxury of having one hand, uh, which
That's an interesting
uh,
luxury. Yeah.
well, it is because when you're a chef, we when I was a catering company, it was just me, and obviously I was doing all the prep, all the production, all that sort of thing. Um, but in the kitchen, you know, I can work on a line great, um, but it's the um, first real time in my life where I've been put in a position where I need to produce for a living that I'm not as good as I would like to be at it because of the fact that I've only got one hand. I grew up playing basketball, playing golf, playing football. Crossing monkey bars and juggling were really the only two things that I wasn't able to do. Um, and
Right.
and I'm perfectly functional on a line. Um, but seeing other people, it's seeing other people go faster used to bother me a lot. Um, but now it's kind of kind of the, okay, like I don't need to be doing that anyway. Like if I'm ever on the line, if you ever see the chef on the line, in a pretty high production restaurant, either he's just knocking off the rust or something has gone
Yeah.
wrong. And then that's why I call it a luxury, because my team kind of understands that.
Yeah.
But I can feel like, hey, you got two hands. You want to carry this while I walk in? Yeah, and they'll laugh. It works out well. But yeah, it's on a podcast you don't really get to see it. It's an interesting facet kind of,
Mm-hmm.
of who I am that I think lends a little bit of a twist to our kitchen. Um, menu creation, that sort of thing, it really doesn't matter. But you talk about the chip on your shoulder, and I talk about the chip on my shoulder jokingly. But because I've only got one hand, it's kind of the reason I have one. A constant desire to kind of prove people wrong. Again, whether the judgment is real or imagined, all of that kind of goes to that drive we were talking about earlier.
Right.
To get real psychological about it. And I think that plays into a lot of it. And to kind of go through a little discussion about myself, and to omit that, I feel would kind of leave out a little bit of the story.
No, absolutely. Yeah, because honestly, we started. We went from the elevator pitch right into what the hell is new American cuisine?
Right.
So,
right.
Well, Chef, I really appreciate you taking the time. So,
absolutely, it was my pleasure, and I'm really honored to be a part of it. Thanks.
And thanks for listening to this episode of Inside the Pressure Cooker. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the show and leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you on how we're doing. And lastly, if you'd like to be on the show, go to InsideThePressureCooker.com and fill out the form. It'll tell me a little bit about you, some of your story, and how it applies to the show. We'd love to hear from you and love to have you on the show.